What compels a man drowning in riches, wealthy enough to bankroll armies and reshape empires, to abandon security for something he can never possess? For Marcus Licinius Crassus, Rome's wealthiest citizen, the answer was a wound that would not heal. He stood alongside Julius Caesar and Gnaeus Pompey Magnus in Rome's inner circle, yet his name remained tethered to gold rather than glory. In a republic that worshipped conquest, that distinction was everything. By 54 before the Common Era, Crassus made a decision. At an age when most men settle into comfort, he chose instead to risk everything on the Parthian Empire, a power Rome had dismissed as inferior. Approximately 40,000 infantry and several thousand cavalry marched eastward under his command. When Crassus crossed the Euphrates in 53, he crossed with absolute certainty that history would remember him as a general, not a merchant. The Armenian king Artavasdes II urged a different approach: invade through mountainous terrain where cavalry archers would lose their advantage. Crassus rejected it. He wanted directness, speed, and most crucially, victory on Roman terms. The historian Plutarch would later observe that beneath Crassus's hunger for military distinction lay something deeper, an insatiable appetite for wealth so consuming that he believed no man should be called prosperous unless his personal fortune could underwrite an entire military campaign. The plains of Mesopotamia stretched before the Roman column like an ocean of dust and heat. Confidence bordering on contempt filled the ranks. These were men who had conquered Gauls, Spaniards, and Africans across 3 continents. The notion that Parthians, mere barbarians, so Rome believed, could pose serious opposition seemed absurd. This assumption would prove catastrophic. The Parthian Empire possessed nothing of Rome's centralized infrastructure, yet it harbored a military genius Rome had fatally misunderstood. Where Rome built strength upon heavy infantry and formation, the Parthians constructed an entirely different system. The cataphract, armored cavalry resembling moving fortresses, and thousands of mounted archers who could fire with devastating accuracy while wheeling across open ground, never remaining still enough to be pinned down. Leading them was Surinna, a general whose strategic brilliance matched his psychological cunning. He commanded perhaps 10 to 12,000 warriors, vastly outnumbered, yet understanding something Crassus had overlooked. Numbers matter less than the intelligent application of force to terrain. Near Kari, in what is now southeastern Turkey, the forces encountered one another around May of 53. Crassus arranged his army in a square formation across the open plain, appropriate for repelling charges, utterly inappropriate for enemies who would never charge as Rome expected. His officers and Armenian allies pleaded for caution. Crassus dismissed them. His confidence had become unshakable, almost invulnerable to reason. The Parthian assault began not with thunder and clash, but with patience. Wave after wave of mounted archers encircled the Roman formation, riding at distances the heavy infantry could not reach. They released volleys in what became known as the Parthian shot, arrows loosed during retreat, never offering Rome's soldiers a stationary target. The sun bore down mercilessly. Shields bristled with projectiles. The ground became a landscape of the wounded and dying. Roman soldiers desperate to close found only empty space. Hour after hour, the agony persisted. The elite infantry that had conquered continents found themselves powerless against opponents who would not stand and fight. They could not stab enemies who remained always distant, always in motion. This was not battle as Rome expected, but systematic execution of an antiquated form of warfare. Among the officers was Publius Licinius Crassus, the commander's own son. Watching his men cut down by invisible attackers, Publius made a decision. He would charge directly at the Parthian center. He would shatter the aura protecting these archers. He gathered his cavalry and hurled them forward with desperate ferocity. The Parthians allowed him close enough to believe success was possible, then enveloped him with precision. The charge became a massacre. Surrounded, cut off from escape, Publius took his own life rather than submit to capture. His head was severed and carried to where his father stood, then displayed before the Roman lines, a horrifying exclamation point signifying total collapse. When Crassus witnessed his son's head held aloft, something within him shattered in ways having nothing to do with wounds. Plutarch records that he stood motionless, gripping his sword, not weeping as men do in profound grief, but frozen as though the cruelty of fate itself had struck him mute. The battle continued into a second day, though calling it that lends too much dignity to what had become sustained catastrophe. Dehydrated, leaderless, their morale decimated, the Roman forces began to fragment. Of roughly 40,000 men brought eastward, over 20,000 fell in combat. Another 10,000 were seized as prisoners. One of Rome's most storied military institutions had been systematically disassembled, not crushed by overwhelming numbers, but deconstructed by an enemy that understood warfare and the Roman mind far more intimately than Rome had imagined possible. In the aftermath, with his forces shattered and his dream transformed into nightmare, Crassus stood on foreign soil as a desperate man. The Parthian general Surinna made an offer: safe passage and terms of truce if Crassus himself would negotiate face to face. Some officers recognized it as a snare. Others, their spirits hollowed by defeat and hungry for any escape, urged acceptance. Crassus, the man who had wielded vast personal wealth to bend Rome itself to his will, now found himself without clear choices. He accepted. The negotiation was set outside Carrhae near the Balissus River. Crassus arrived with a small contingent. Surinna presented himself in full ceremonial splendor, robed in royal silks, surrounded by intimidating cavalry. Initial moments unfolded with deceptive courtesy. Food and drink were offered. The Parthians insisted upon sealing the treaty through traditional procession on horseback. But as the Romans mounted alongside the Parthian delegation, something shifted. Whether deliberate stratagem or misunderstanding born of raw nerves, tension erupted into chaos. Crassus was seized by Parthian troops. His guards were overwhelmed and killed. The wealthiest man in Rome, convinced that gold could transform circumstances, suddenly discovered he was a prisoner in the hands of enemies who valued his death more than his ransom. What happened next would embed itself into ancient memory as punishment so symbolically precise it seemed less like execution than divine judgment. The Parthians understood Crassus perfectly. They comprehended his defining obsession with accumulation, a lifetime spent in worship of wealth and financial dominion. Surinna devised a death that would transform Crassus's most fundamental characteristic into the instrument of his destruction. Ancient sources describe what followed with theatrical detail. Molten gold was forced into Crassus's mouth as he was restrained by captors. Whether this represents literal fact or embellishment added by historians processing trauma through metaphor remains debated. But the message transcended methodology. Crassus, whose entire existence had been defined by acquiring precious metals, was silenced by that very gold. It was not merely execution. It was a statement directed at Rome itself. A communication that Parthia could not be conquered through arrogance, that wealth could not purchase victory, and that empires built on assumed superiority faced inevitable reckoning. His remains were treated with mockery extending beyond death. His head and hands were dispatched to the Parthian court as props in theatrical performances. Rome's defeated commander transformed into a stage prop for entertainment. Some accounts suggest his head was delivered to the Armenian king, used as a centerpiece for a Greek tragedy performed before the Parthian king Oroda II during celebrations for his son's marriage. The historian Cassius Dio would note simply that Crassus was slain, his head dispatched to the Parthian throne, and tales of his fate spread as cautionary warning across the known world. If you're wondering whether Roman commanders ever understood their mistake, or whether they asked themselves what might have transpired if Crassus had listened to Armenian advice instead of rejecting it, let me know in the comments. These are the questions that make history breathe. Crassus had gambled everything for a different immortality, not accumulated wealth but military glory. He chased both simultaneously and was silenced by both. His ambition would reshape the entire eastern frontier, igniting decades of rivalry between Rome and Parthia, demonstrating with undeniable clarity that treasure and pride are no match for intelligent strategy and the indifference of fate. History punishes those who believe themselves exempt from its rules. Crassus had assumed what worked in Rome would function identically on Mesopotamian plains. The world operated according to different mathematics entirely. His story endures as meditation on ambition and catastrophe, a reminder that the drive to transcend one's station can transform even the greatest fortune into prelude to ruin. What do you believe ultimately sealed Crassus's fate? Genuine insecurity masquerading as ambition, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts below, and if stories of empires colliding, ambition meeting judgment, and history's cruelest ironies resonate with you, subscribe to follow more narratives of those who challenged the world and found it unmoved by their certainty.